No one could orchestrate an attack quite like the former world champion Thal. He was a magician, and in 1957 his opponent enters the forest. Let's see what happens here. In the game, Thal starts off by lunging in with the knight to g4, and this opens up the scope for both the bishop and the queen to join in the attack. What his opponent needed to do was relinquish the bishop pair with bxg4. But reluctant to do so, his opponent thought they could play the simple move, pawn to h3, and now the knight has to retreat. But Thal, he did not lunge in with his knight to retreat. He goes knight takes f2 and sacrifices knight for a pawn because he noticed this rook on e1 is left undefended. The king takes, and now the follow-up, queen to h4 check, and the problem for white is that if you go back king to gone, the rook is hanging. So instead you have to play the move king to f1, and now bishop to d4 threatens checkmate with queen to f2. It would seem like with all of these pieces around the king, this attack should be easily dealt with. But that's not the case. There's only one move to stop checkmate, the clumsy knight to done, now defending the square. And we're left in this position. Thal sacrificed the knight for a pawn. We have an attack on the dark squares, but white is one move away to consolidating with knight to f3. So what do? Well, Thal, his idea was queen takes h3. Now sacrificing his queen for a pawn because this queen cannot be accepted. If you take, its bishop takes h3 and the bishop sliced through, its checkmate. So after queen takes h3, we got two pawns for the piece, and we're immediately threatening queen to hone with checkmate. His opponent finds the only move bishop to f3 now evacuates the e2 square for the king to run, and this means the queen is actually hanging on h3. So we see queen to h2 getting out of the way and preparing queen to g1 with check. This won't be checkmate. The king escapes, but this does set up the move knight takes d5, winning a third pawn. The pawn can't take back. The rook would control the e-file and queen to g1 would be checkmate. So his opponent plays knight to e3 and now develops the knight defending against the threat and blocks the bishop on this very active diagonal. But Thal, he needs to bring more pieces into the attack and brings a new way to do that. Pawn to f5, now trying to open up the f-file for his rook. The pawn can't take. The knight would be undefended, so his opponent continues trying to consolidate his position with knight to c4. Now the knights defend each other, and he's opened up the scope for the bishop to develop. But now we take on e4. The bishop recaptures, and now the e and f files are activated for Thal's rooks, but instead of giving a check and allowing the king to escape, Thal uses all sides of the board to attack. He goes bishop to a6 and develops the bishop on a new diagonal, pinning the knight to the king. And he's also opened up the rook to join in the attack. His opponent, they try bishop to f3, now shielding the king on this newly opened f-file, but now Thal, he has time, he just brings the rooks into the attack. With rook to e5, now preparing to double up on the e-file. Again, this knight can never take the rook, it's pinned. So we see the move rook to a3, now defending on the third rank, but Thal, he just brings everything in. Rook to e8, and the pressure keeps amassing. All of Thal's pieces are becoming activated and all of white's pieces are paralyzed. This knight, it can't move, it's pinned. This knight can't move. Queen to g1 would be checkmate, and white is struggling to do anything. So they bring the final piece into the game with bishop to d2 finishing their development, and preparing king to e2 to run the king on the queen side. But unfortunately, it's just too slow. Thal's pieces work way too well together. He plays knight takes d5 and sacrifices his knight, bringing the final piece into the attack. The problem is, after you take, we have rook takes d5 again. The knight can't take the rook, queen to g1 is checkmate. So instead we see king to e2 desperately trying to run on the queen's side, but now Thal can end the game with brute force. He takes the knight, the rook recaptures, and finally bishop takes c4, and the bishop cannot be accepted. His opponent correctly resigned the game, because if you take, it's queen takes g2 and queen takes d2 checkmate.